The call came at 5:47 inches the morning on a Wednesday in October. I was already up, the way I have been every morning since I retired, standing on the back deck of my house in Ashland, Oregon, watching the first pale light touch the top of Mount Ashland while my coffee went cold in my hand. My dog, a 12-year-old beagle named Chester, was sniffing along the fence line the way he does when a raccoon has been through in the night. The mountains were quiet. Everything was quiet. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Portland area code. I answered because I always answer. Old habit. From 31 years in the fire service. You pick up. Mr. Whitfield, this is Dr. Anara Solberg at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. I'm calling about your daughter, Claire. She was admitted last night through the emergency department. Sir, her condition is serious. We believe she's experiencing acute liver failure, and we need to speak with family about potential donor options as quickly as possible. I set my coffee mug on the railing. Chester looked up at me from the yard. I'll be there in 4 hours, I said. My name is Gene Whitfield. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a firefighter and then a fire captain with the Ashland Fire and Rescue Department before I retired 2 years ago with a bad knee, a modest pension, and more time than I knew what to do with. Before that, I was a husband and a father. I had a wife named Diane and a daughter named Claire, and for 22 years I thought that was what my life was built on. Then Diane told me she wanted out. Said I had given everything I had to the job and left her with nothing. Said she had been lonely for years while I worked nights and weekends and came home too tired to be present for anything that mattered. She was not entirely wrong about that. I have never pretended she was. The divorce was finalized in the spring 8 years ago. Claire was 20 at the time, finishing her sophomore year at the University of Oregon. I thought it would be different with an adult child. No custody arrangements, no lawyers fighting over school schedules. I thought Claire and I would stay close because we chose to. For the first year, we did. Then the calls got shorter. Then they got fewer. Then a birthday card I sent came back unopened with return to sender written in her handwriting. Not Diane's, hers. I called Diane and asked what happened. She said Claire needed space. Said Claire had always known the marriage was unhappy and that I had been absent even when I was home. I did not argue. What was there to argue about? I moved to Ashland because I had always loved the mountains in the southern part of the state, found a small house with a vegetable garden and a fence Chester could not escape from, and I learned how to be alone. I got decent at it over time. 6 years passed without hearing my daughter's voice. The drive from Ashland to Portland takes 4.5 hours if you push it and skip stops. I pushed it. The sun came up over the Cascades around Medford, and I drove north through the Willamette Valley with the radio off, thinking about the last time I had seen Claire in person, her college graduation. She had been polite, careful, the way you are with someone you are not sure you trust. Diane stood between us in every photograph. I drove home afterward and drank 2 glasses of whiskey alone and told myself it would get better when she was older. That time has a way of softening things. I pulled into the OHSU parking garage at 10:15. The hospital sits on a hill above Portland with a view of the river and Mount Hood on clear days. I found the transplant unit on the 6th floor and gave my name to the charge nurse. She walked me to a room at the end of the corridor and stopped at the door. She knows you're coming, the nurse said. But she hasn't seen you in a while, just so you're prepared. I nodded and pushed the door open. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed with a tube in her arm and a monitor tracking her vitals and the kind of yellow tint to her skin that I recognized from years of responding to medical emergencies. Jaundice. Her liver was failing. She was 28 years old and she looked like she had aged 10 years since the last time I saw her. Thin in a way that made her cheekbones too sharp, her dark hair pulled back and dull. But her eyes, when she opened them and looked at me, were still the same deep brown they had always been. She stared at me for a long moment. "Dad," she said finally. "You came." The word hit me somewhere in the chest. I had not heard her call me that in 6 years. "Of course I came," I said. "Where else would I be?" I sat down next to her bed and we talked for about 20 minutes. Careful and halting at first, the way two people talk when they are relearning how to be in the same room. She told me what had happened. She had been feeling off for a couple months. Tired, some abdominal pain she had chalked up to stress. She was working as an environmental consultant in Portland. Long hours, a lot of travel. Then, 3 nights ago, she woke up with severe pain, and her roommate called an ambulance when her skin started turning yellow. The doctors ran every test they had. The verdict was autoimmune hepatitis, accelerated and aggressive, her own immune system attacking her liver. The organ was failing faster than medication could stop. She needed a transplant. Living donor, the transplant coordinator explained when she came in later that afternoon to speak with me. A family member donates a portion of their liver. The liver regenerates in both donor and recipient. At your daughter's age, with her overall health, she would be an excellent candidate if we can find a match quickly. I want to be tested, I said. We were hoping you'd say that. We'll get you started today. I spent that first afternoon in the hospital going through intake forms and blood draws and medical history questionnaires that went back 3 generations. The transplant coordinator was a calm and organized woman who explained every step without rushing me, treated me like someone who could handle information, which I appreciated. 31 years in emergency services will do that for you. I could handle information. What I was less certain about was the 6 years of silence that sat between my daughter and me like a wall I did not know how to climb. I found a hotel 2 blocks from the hospital and settled in to wait for results. On the second day, Claire and I talked longer. About what had happened after the divorce, about the cards that came back unopened, about the voicemails I had left that she had never returned. She was quiet for a long time before she said anything. Mom told me you had checked out long before the divorce, she said. That you were going through the motions because you felt obligated, but you didn't really want to be a father anymore. That the job was your real family. I looked at her. That is not true, I said. Not one word of that is true. I know, she said. I figured that out eventually. It took me a while. She looked down at her hands. I think I wanted to believe it for a while because it made the distance easier. If you didn't want me, then it wasn't a loss. I stayed quiet because there was nothing useful I could say to that yet. We were not done hurting each other, but we were at least sitting in the same room doing it, which felt like progress. On the 3rd day, Dr. Solberg's office called and asked if I could come in. The transplant coordinator was there, and so was a man I had not met yet, a tall, quiet physician named Dr. Marcus Tan, who was introduced as the head of the transplant program. They sat across from me at a small conference table with a folder between them. Dr. Solberg had the careful expression of someone about to deliver news they had rehearsed. Mr. Whitfield, she said, we've completed the preliminary compatibility analysis from your blood work. I want to be straightforward with you because you deserve that. She paused. The HLA typing results, the tissue markers we use to determine donor compatibility, show no biological relationship between you and Claire. I did not understand what she was saying. Dr. Tan leaned forward. Mr. Whitfield, the genetic markers in your blood are inconsistent with a parent-child relationship. You are not Claire's biological father. The air in the room went flat. That's not possible, I said. We ran the panel twice, Dr. Solberg said. There is no error in the data. I'm sorry, I understand this is an extraordinary thing to hear. I stared at the folder on the table. The folder I knew without opening contained the documented proof that something I had never once questioned in 28 years of my life was not true. I sat in that chair for a long time without speaking. The 2 doctors waited. They had done this before, I could tell. They had the patience of people accustomed to sitting with someone while their world rearranged itself around them. Who is her father? I finally said. We don't know, Dr. Tan said. That would require testing other candidates. But Mr. Whitfield, I want to be clear. The biological connection between you and Claire is the kind of thing the courts and the medical community define by genetics. But it is not the only definition that exists. I almost laughed. I did not laugh. I nodded and thanked them, and walked out of the office and kept walking until I found a stairwell at the end of the corridor, and I sat down on the top step and pressed my back against the cold concrete wall and thought about 28 years. 28 years of believing something that was not true. Coaches youth softball when she was 9. Fixed her first bicycle tire. Sat in the emergency room at 2 in the morning when she broke her collarbone in a fall from a horse at 13. Helped her move into the dormitory at the University of Oregon on the hottest day in August, and drove home with an empty truck and a full heart. Believed every second of it was real. The believing had been real. I knew that much. Whatever had been done to me, my love for my daughter had never been in question, not once in 28 years. But someone had let me love a child under false pretenses, and I needed to know who. I found Diane through her sister. She had remarried 4 years ago, a retired physician in Lake Oswego, a suburb south of Portland. I called her that evening from the hotel. I had not spoken to my ex-wife since the year after the divorce, a brief conversation about redirecting Claire's mail. She answered on the third ring. "Jean." Her voice was careful immediately. "The coordinator called me today. She said you were being tested." "The results came back," I said. "There's no biological match." Silence. "Diane." "I know," she said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "I know what the results say." I let the silence sit. "Jean, I'm sorry. I have been sorry for a long time. It was a long time ago. Before Claire was born, there was a period when things between us were very difficult. You remember that winter? You were working 70-hour weeks, and I felt invisible in my own marriage. I made a mistake. I got involved with someone from my office. His name was Patrick Sewell. It went on for about 3 months. I did not speak. When I got pregnant," she continued, "I told myself it had to be yours. The timing made more sense that way. I wanted it to be yours. And then Claire was born, and she looked like you. I convinced myself she looked like you, and after a while I think I almost believed it myself. I almost believed there was no question." "Almost," I said. She did not answer that. "Does Patrick Sewell know?" There was a long pause. "I told him," she said. "About 5 years ago. At a work reunion. I had too much to drink and it came out. He said he appreciated me telling him and then he never brought it up again. He has a family now, a wife, 2 boys. He lives in Seattle. You kept this secret for 28 years, Diane. I thought I was protecting everyone," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought if I told you, our family would fall apart. And then when the family fell apart anyway, it felt too late. There was no good moment." "There is never a good moment for that kind of truth," I said. "You should have told it anyway." "I know, Jean, I know. I'm sorry." I ended the call. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I went back to the hospital, and I sat in the chair next to my daughter's bed, and I watched her sleep, and I tried to figure out what I was going to say to her. She woke up around 9. She looked at my face and something shifted in hers. "What's wrong?" she said. "What did the test say?" I told her everything. I told her as carefully and directly as I could, the way I had learned to deliver bad news during 31 years of walking into rooms where families waited to hear things they did not want to hear. I told her about the genetic results, about the phone call with her mother, about Patrick Sewell. She did not cry at first. She went very still, the way she used to do when she was small and trying to process something difficult. She had always been a thinker, even as a child. She would go quiet and still and then come out the other side with something precise. "So everything Mom told me about you not wanting to be my father," she said finally, "had nothing to do with biology," I said. "Your mother found a way to make the distance easier to explain. I don't think she planned it as carefully as it sounds. But I also can't make excuses for her." My daughter looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. "You spent 28 years as my dad, and the whole time you didn't know." "The whole time I didn't know," I said. "And it didn't change anything about how I felt. I want you to understand that. Whatever comes next, that part doesn't change." She looked away toward the window. The Portland skyline was lit up in the dark outside. She was quiet for a long time. "Is he going to help me?" she asked finally. "This Patrick Sewell?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm going to find out." Finding Patrick Sewell took 2 days. I did not need a private investigator. Diane gave me his contact information through her sister. He was 54 years old, a civil engineer at a firm in Seattle, married, 2 teenage sons. When I called his cell phone on the second morning and told him who I was and why I was calling, the silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "I'm listening," he said finally. "My daughter needs a liver transplant," I told him. "She is 28 years old and her organ is failing. You may be her biological father. You may be a compatible donor. She needs an answer from you today." More silence. "I need to think about this," he said. "Her liver is failing," I said again. "I am not telling you this to be cruel. I am telling you because that is the reality of the situation. She does not have time for extended deliberation. Give me a few hours," he said. He called back that evening. He said he would come. He said he had spoken with his wife and that it was complicated, but that he would come. He arrived the next morning. I met him in the hospital lobby because the transplant coordinator thought it might be better if he had a moment to settle before going directly to the floor. He was a lean man with graying hair and the kind of careful posture that suggested he had spent years containing himself. He shook my hand and looked me in the eye, and I could see that he was frightened. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I should have done this differently," he said, "years ago." "Yes," I said, "but you're here now. Let's get you tested." His evaluation took most of the day. I spent it with my daughter. We talked more in those hours than we had in 6 years combined. She asked me about retirement, about Chester, about the garden. She told me about her work, a project mapping erosion patterns in the coastal range, work that she said made her feel useful in the way that mattered to her. I told her about the fire that had taken 2 of my crew members in my 3rd year on the job, the fire I had carried quietly for 30 years, and about how I had finally started seeing a counselor after retirement, and how it had helped more than I expected. She listened the way she used to listen when she was young, completely, without interruption. She had always done that. I had forgotten how much I missed it. The test results came back the following afternoon. Dr. Tan asked Patrick and me both to come to the conference room, which I understood to mean the news was not straightforward. "Mr. Sewell," Dr. Tan said, "the genetic panel confirms that you are Claire's biological father. The HLA typing shows a partial compatibility match with Claire. Not an ideal match, but within the range we consider viable for a living donor transplant. Given her condition and the time constraints, this is our best option." Patrick exhaled. "Okay, what do I have to do?" The surgical team walked him through the procedure. A left lobe resection. 6 to 8 hours in the operating room. A recovery of 4 to 6 weeks. Significant but manageable risks. He agreed to everything. Said all the right things, asked the right questions, seemed resolved. I sat across the table and watched his face and thought about Grant Holloway, though I had no reason to think about him. I had no way of knowing then what Patrick Sewell was going to do. I went to see my daughter before her procedure and Patrick's. She was nervous, which was reasonable. She reached for my hand when I came through the door. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Scared," she said. She paused. "Dad, I need to ask you something. Anything." She looked at me. "After this is over, assuming everything goes okay, are you going to be in my life? Are we going to actually try?" I squeezed her hand. "I have been trying to be in your life for 6 years," I said. "I never stopped trying. What changed is that you're asking now, and you weren't before, and that means yes, we're going to actually try." She smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen from her since I arrived. I sat with her until they came to take her to the pre-op suite. Then I found a chair in the waiting room and I waited. The transplant took 9 hours. The surgical team found additional damage to her liver that they had not fully anticipated from the imaging, and the procedure was longer and more complex than planned. A nurse came out at the 6-hour mark to tell me it was taking longer, and not to be alarmed, they were being thorough, my daughter was stable. I thanked her and went back to my chair. I thought about a house fire in my 8th year on the job, a 2-story craftsman on a residential street, fully involved when we arrived, a family of 4 unaccounted for. My captain had sent 2 of us in through a side door, and we found the children on the 2nd floor before the staircase went. I carried the younger one out myself, a girl around 3 years old, and I stood on the lawn with her while the paramedics came, and she had looked up at me with the exact expression I had just seen on my daughter's face when they wheeled her away. Complete trust. Terrifying trust. The kind that requires you to be worthy of it. I had spent 31 years trying to be worthy of that trust. I was not done trying. The surgeon came out at 9 hours and 40 minutes. She sat down across from me and I read her face before she said a word. "She's out of surgery," the surgeon said. "The transplant took. We'll know more in the next 48 hours, but her vitals are strong and the early indicators are positive. She's going to need careful monitoring and a long recovery, but Mr. Whitfield, I think your daughter is going to be all right." I pressed my hand over my eyes for a moment. That is a habit I have had since I was young, covering my eyes when something breaks through. I was not embarrassed by it. I just needed a second. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you." Patrick Sewell was discharged from his own recovery room the following morning. I went to see him before he left. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, dressed and ready, looking at his phone. "She's doing well," I said. "The transplant took." "That's great," he said. "That's really great." He said it the way you say something is great when you are relieved but already thinking about the next thing. I saw it in his posture, the slight forward lean, the readiness to move. I recognized it because I had spent 31 years working alongside people in high-stress situations, and I knew what a person looked like when they had done the hard thing and were now preparing to return to their regular life. "Are you planning to meet her?" I asked. "When she's well enough." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if that's the right move," he said. "My family is complicated. My wife is being supportive, but she's struggling. I don't want to walk into Claire's life and create more disruption than I've already caused." "I understand that," I said. "I do. But she is 28 years old and she is your daughter, and that is information she is going to have to find a way to live with for the rest of her life. What she does with it is her choice. But I think she deserves the chance to make it." He nodded slowly. "Maybe when things settle down," he said. "Maybe in a few months." He left that afternoon. Went back to Seattle, back to his wife and his sons and his civil engineering projects. I watched him go and said nothing more because I had said what I had to say and the rest was not mine to control. I went back to my daughter's room and sat down next to her bed. Her eyes were open. She was pale and weak and there were lines from the monitors running from both arms, but she was awake and her color was better than it had been in days. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Like someone took part of my liver out," she said. I smiled. "That's accurate." She looked at me for a moment. "Did Patrick leave?" "He did." "Is he coming back?" I told her what he had said. I told her honestly because she asked and because she was a grown woman and she deserved to know what she was dealing with. She listened without interrupting, the way she always listened, and when I was finished, she looked at the ceiling for a while. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? I don't need him to come back," she said. She turned her head on the pillow to look at me. "I have you. That's what I need." I stayed in Portland for 3 more weeks. I slept in the hotel, went to the hospital every morning, sat with my daughter through the slow and uncomfortable process of recovery. We talked a great deal. About things that needed to be said, old ones and new ones. About her mother, whom she had a complicated conversation with by phone during the 2nd week. About the years that were lost and whether they could be rebuilt into something that resembled a relationship, or whether they would just remain a scar that you learned to live with. We decided they could be rebuilt. Scars heal imperfectly, but they hold. Her roommate came by several times. A young woman named Becca who brought food and magazines and talked to my daughter the way a good friend talks, easily and without effort. Becca shook my hand the first time we met and said, "Claire talks about you." I said I hoped some of it was good. She laughed and said most of it was. Most of it, I said later to my daughter. She smiled. I had some things to work through, she said. I think I was angrier than I realized. At me? At the situation. She paused. You were the easiest person to aim it at because you weren't there to defend yourself. And Mom kept the target painted. I understand that, I said. I know you do. She looked at me. You're not angry at her? You seem so calm. I was a fire captain for 18 years, I said. You develop a fairly high threshold before calm becomes impossible. And I've had some time. What I did not tell her was that I had spent 4 nights in the hotel crying in a way I had not cried since my mother died, angry and grieving for 28 years that had been built on a lie, for 3 years before that when the marriage was visibly crumbling and I had been too stubborn and too devoted to the job to see it clearly. I had cried for the version of my life I had believed in and then lost and then discovered had never existed exactly the way I thought it did. I gave myself 4 nights for that. Then I got up and went back to the hospital. My daughter did not need me to fall apart. She needed me to show up. So I showed up. She was discharged on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after the surgery. She could not drive, and she could not live alone yet. So she came back to Ashland with me for 8 weeks of recovery. It was not a plan we had made in advance. She suggested it, and I said yes so fast she laughed. Chester did not know what to do with her at first. He had been an only creature for 2 years, and he circled her suspiciously for the first day, then parked himself next to her feet on the couch and refused to move for the remaining weeks. She fell in love with him immediately. He fell in love with her approximately 36 hours in, which for a 12-year-old beagle with strong opinions about new people was practically instantaneous. We settled into a routine that felt natural in a way I had not expected. I made breakfast. She rested in the mornings. In the afternoons, when she had enough energy, we walked short distances along the creek behind the house, a little farther each day, building her back up the way you build anything back up, slowly and with attention. We watched a lot of old films in the evenings. She made opinions about them the same way she had made opinions about everything since she was 5 years old, directly and without apology. I had always loved that about her. She called her mother twice during those weeks. The conversations were not easy, but they were honest. And honesty, I had come to believe, was the only useful currency when you were rebuilding something. Her mother apologized again. My daughter listened. I stayed out of it because it was not my conversation to be part of. Patrick Sewell sent an email 6 weeks after the surgery. He said he was glad to hear she was recovering well. He said he hoped she would not think badly of him. He said he was not sure what the right path forward was for either of them. My daughter read the email twice, set her phone down on the kitchen table, and went back to the documentary we had been watching. He said he's not sure what the right path forward is, she said. Yeah, I read it. She picked up her coffee mug. Meanwhile, you drove 4.5 hours at 5 in the morning without being asked. That's what dads do, I said. She looked at me across the kitchen table, and her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. The same expression she had had in the hospital room, precise and clear. Yeah, she said, that's what dads do. She went back to Portland in December, cleared by her doctors for a gradual return to work. The environmental project she had been mapping before she got sick had continued without her, but her firm had held her position, and she returned to it part-time in January. She called me on Sundays now, regularly, without prompting. The calls lasted an hour or more. We talked about her work, about the mountains, about Chester's increasingly dramatic opinions regarding squirrels. She drove down to Ashland in February for a weekend, and we hiked the lower trail at Crater Lake, not far, just enough to feel the cold air and the open sky and the particular silence of a mountain in winter. She took a photograph on that hike. I did not know she was taking it. I was ahead of her on the trail, looking out at the lake, and she took it from behind, my back to the camera, the water and the snow-covered rim in front of me. She texted it to me that night with no caption. I saved it immediately. I have another photograph, an older one, from her 7th birthday party in the backyard of our house in Eugene. She is blowing out candles on a yellow cake, and her eyes are closed, and she is concentrating with her whole face the way children concentrate. I am standing to her left, with one hand on her back, slightly out of frame. You can see my arm, my watch, the edge of my face. I used to look at that photograph after the divorce and feel the specific grief of someone who has lost something they cannot get back. Now I look at it and feel grateful for the 7-year-old who blew out those candles and the man who was standing next to her, imperfect and present, believing with everything he had that this was his life and his child and that he was right where he was supposed to be. He was right where he was supposed to be. Biology did not put me in that backyard. 30 years of deciding every single day to be her father put me there. Biology did not sit in the waiting room for 9 hours while surgeons worked to save her. 30 years of deciding put me there too. And biology did not drive south through the mountains in February to walk beside her on a trail above a frozen lake, but I did, and she was there, and it was real. I learned something in that hospital waiting room in Portland that I am still working through. I learned that the story I believed about my life was not entirely accurate, and that the love I built on that story was entirely real. Both things are true at the same time. I have stopped trying to reconcile them because I do not think reconciliation is possible or necessary. You just hold them together and keep going. My daughter is 28 years old. She is smart and precise, and she has her mother's determination and something else, something that is just hers. A quietness that expands into something enormous when you give her enough room. She calls me on Sundays. She is coming back to Ashland in March with her hiking poles and a better pair of boots, and we are going to try the longer trail this time. That is my life. It is imperfect and honest, and it is mine. So, I want to ask you something. What makes a father? Is it the biology, the genetics, the fact that 2 markers matched on a test somewhere? Is it the legal name on a birth certificate? Or is it the 7-year-old's birthday party, the emergency room at 2 in the morning, the 5-hour drive before dawn to a hospital where someone you love needs you? I know what I believe. I believe it is the showing up. I believe it is every ordinary day you chose to be present for, and every hard day you did not run from, and every year that followed the year before it, accumulated and steady, the kind of thing that cannot be measured or contested by any test ever invented. I lost 6 years with my daughter because of a lie. But I did not lose my daughter, and she did not lose me. And when she needed someone to walk through the door without being asked, I was there. That is the whole of it. That is everything. Tell me your story. What does family mean to you? If this reached something in you, hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. We put out new stories every week, real people in impossible situations finding their way through. Subscribe so you don't miss a single one, and turn on notifications. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means more than I can say. I'll see you in the next one.